probably the most important and relevant political discussion right now is the election. And because of that, I know that this video is going to turn off and piss off a lot of people and thus maybe hinder my channel growth for a little bit. But I really don't care because the debate on this has already been decided for me. I don't feel that the other side has any really strong arguments. And so, because of that, I want to urge all of you to hop on the Biden train. We all need to be riding with Biden. Now, as a former Bernie or Buster, I understand the criticisms that one might have against him. So, in the interest of good faith, I want to go over some of those. Now, there is validity that Biden authored the 1994 Clinton crime bill and was a fierce advocate for the war on drugs, both of which proliferated the mass incarceration of Black and Latin folk, thus disenfranchising them. Biden and Trump are indistinguishable in their relationship to the bourgeois class. I don't believe either of them are going to meaningfully elevate the working class in this country. Biden and Trump are indistinguishable in their stance on foreign policy. The Middle East is fucked either way. I doubt that a Biden presidency would make any meaningful progress towards racial justice. And there's just overall no way that Biden is going to move any further left. I acknowledge that these make Biden an awful candidate, but he is still better than Trump. Specifically for 3 key reasons. Now, there is a practical side and a theory side to this argument. I'm going to go with the practical side. So, of those 3 reasons, I've identified harm reduction, democracy, and what a Biden presidency entails for the future for the left in America. Those are my 3 reasons. So, let's jump right into harm reduction. Now, the Biden campaign has actually made some concessions to Bernie Sanders in exchange for Bernie pledging that he would support Biden's campaign. Of those, some pretty cool ones are making public college and university free for students who come from families with a combined income of $125,000, $10,000 student debt forgiveness, and lowering the Medicare age eligibility from 65 to 60. Now, these aren't Medicare for all, these aren't free public tuition, these aren't legalizing cannabis, but these policies aren't nothing. And these policies would improve a lot of people's lives. Probably improve the life of someone you know. And that means we should still be advocating for them. We don't get everything in one fell swoop. Anyone that believes that we could get everything from Biden really doesn't understand how political capital works or how really politics works. You don't get everything you advocate for in politics. You kind of always had to concede, at least in a electoral system. Now, I'd like to do away with that electoral system, but that's not the discussion right now. So more on harm reduction. A Biden presidency wouldn't arbitrarily revoke medical protections for queer folk. A Biden administration wouldn't arbitrarily fire the pandemic response team, which means that we'd probably have a better chance at escaping this fucking quarantine hellscape and restarting the economy. A Biden administration wouldn't disseminate conspiracies that undermine academic consensus surrounding the pandemic and thus putting people more at risk of contracting COVID. A Biden administration certainly would do more to curb the proliferation of climate change more than a Trump presidency would. And so these are only just some of the policies that a Trump administration entails. And like I said, these aren't Medicare for all, but like seating these policy positions on principle, on the notion that I won't vote for a pedophile, is incredibly selfish, because effectively what you're doing is you're forwarding your moral and principle purity ahead of what the consequences are for voting for Biden. And as a consequentialist, as someone that believes that socialism is only surrounded by the consequences, I don't believe that you're a true leftist if you take this position, if you only vote based on principle. It's not about principle. I wouldn't think that you're morally unpure for voting for Biden. Anyone that thinks that is fucking insane, because voting for Biden implies a lot of improvement in people's lives. Even if it's marginally better than Trump, it is still better. And that's all we got to work with. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Trump, specifically on my democracy reason. So, anyone making the claim that Biden is a fascist has no idea what fascism is, or is at least confused about the definition of fascism. Biden is a neolib, and despite all the bad shit that comes with neoliberalism, it is still better than fascism. Do you all remember Portland? Well, if you don't, let me jog your memory. Protesters were being kidnapped off the street for exercising their First Amendment right. Well, that was only a taste of fascism. Imagine that, but across the entire fucking country, to anyone that has any dissenting opinion against the government. The only reason why Trump hasn't been able to assume total power is because our democratic foundation was built fairly well and fairly competently. But that doesn't mean it can't be eroded. And with Trump actively trying to rig the election through the USPS by undermining mail-in voting and disseminating conspiracies about how mail-in voting is inherently more susceptible to voter fraud, and how he's basically already pledged to undermining the results if he doesn't win on the first night. These are characteristics of Trump trying to push the America in a fascist direction. Now, what's cool about democracy is that it's pretty good for keeping the fascists out of office. But only if people fucking vote. Let me reiterate that. We can only keep the fascists out of office if we fucking vote. Otherwise, the people that support those fascists are gonna go vote either way. And we're not voting in a fair election, we're voting in a rigged election. So, we need to vote in such a mass that it is impossible, that it is absolute that Biden wins, that it is impossible to fabricate the election results. That is why we need to vote, because Trump is rigging this fucking election. Now, another reason for a democracy is that a Biden administration although I don't think it would happen, would be more inclined to abolishing the Electoral College. That is not something that is going to happen under a Republican president. The Republicans do not practice forbearance. For those of you that don't know what forbearance means, essentially it means when you take political office, you ensure that you won't use your position of power to undermine democracy. The Republicans are doing this in such a blatant, obvious way. The best example I can give you is the governor election in Georgia. Effectively, where the Democratic candidate essentially lost to the Republican candidate, despite the Republican candidate being the overseer for the election. And you can go look this up for more details. I don't remember the names of the candidates. But surprise, surprise, she lost. Because the Republicans don't practice forbearance. And because of that, at least in this framework, we really shouldn't either. But aside from that, my main point is that we need to fucking vote. That's it. We need to vote in such a large quantity that it is impossible to ignore the election results. Now, we're going to get into my biggest reason, personally, why we should vote for Biden. And that is the future for the left in America. Now, let's do some history. Leftists, at least historically, have never survived a fascist regime. Fascist governments will use all of their power against dissenting parties, which, respectively, have no power. We cannot win against a fascist government. There is historical precedent for this, specifically Germany. Prior to the rise of Nazi Germany, there was a couple of really politically relevant parties. There was the Communist Party of Germany, the KDP. There were the Social Democrats, and there was the Nazi Party. Now, without getting super into detail of the historical specifics, the KDP and SOCDEMs were essentially would work with one another for some political goals. But the SOCDEMs ended up betraying the KDP. And because of this betrayal, the KDP was so fucking pissed that they essentially feuded the entire time with the liberal SOCDEMs. And because the KDP could not overcome their feud with the SOCDEMs, the fascists, the Nazis, were able to slip under the radar and assume power effectively with no real opposition. And once they were in power, they criminalized, exiled, and executed all dissenting members of opposing parties. The SOCDEMs, the KDP, all gone. And what do we have now? Effectively, no real strong communist party really anywhere in Western Europe. And Trump is now trying to do the exact same thing here. Do you all remember when Trump pledged to try to label Antifa as a terror organization? That is not on accident. Trump knows what he's doing when he says that Antifa is a terror organization. Labeling an organization as a terror group effectively means that the president can do whatever they want in terms of addressing that issue. Look to the Middle East, where we have an extrajudicial military presence because of the war on terror. Labeling Antifa as a terror organization would effectively bring that here against all leftists, because Antifa really isn't an organization. Antifa is just anti-fascism, and anyone that is anti-fascist can be labeled as Antifa, which means everybody on the left is Antifa, which would mean that Trump has the ability to curtail, to prosecute anyone that could be labeled as Antifa. So, essentially what I'm saying is that the left is not going to survive another 4 years of Trump. Myself, and basically all of BreadTube, anyone with an opposing opinion, is going to get black-bagged in the middle of the night and carted off to who knows where and executed. Now, if that doesn't happen, there are still some implications that another 4 years of Trump would imply. That is at the worst with another 4 years of Trump. At best, Trump is going to be a lame duck president, and he is going to create the conditions necessary for a more methodical, a more conniving fascist to run for president in 2024 or 2028. And so essentially what I'm saying is that another 4 years of Trump pretty much locks in fascism for this country. Now, I don't believe that we can bring about socialism in this country without direct action. However, the left really doesn't hold any institutional power. The left doesn't have public support, both of which are needed to win a revolution. And now I say this in response to those leftists that say that another 4 years of Trump would lead to the collapse of the United States and lead to a revolution. We would not win that revolution. We would get stomped. We would not have the numbers, the manpower, the supply chains, the weapons necessary to win that revolution. And that revolution would definitely swing right. And the United States has the military and economic capacity to remain a fascist government much longer than Germany did. So, effectively, not getting Trump out of office signifies the death of leftism in America. Now, there's also another reason why we should vote for Biden, and that's because the DNC is not going to do shit unless we vote. So if you've been watching the Democratic National Convention, you probably noticed that there was a considerable amount of virtue signaling to religion and nationalism. It was pretty disturbing. Now, I say this because it's almost as if they go where the voters are. You know, the DNC, if they cannot win an election against someone who has fucked up this hard in responding to a global pandemic and to an economic crisis, they're not going to go left. They're going to go right, because apparently that's what people vote for. And I say this because the left is not going to strong-arm the DNC. We are too small for the DNC to care about us right now. But what if we were bigger? What if the left was so large that the DNC had no choice but to forward a more progressive leftist candidate Well, what we need to do is to wake up the sleeping libs. The thing is, though, is that the libs are only going to keep sleeping if there's another Trump presidency. The president really only acts as a lightning rod for all the failings that come with the administration or with the country during that time. And this is relevant because Biden won the nomination because Democrats felt that he was more electable than Bernie. Democrats really wanted to prioritize getting Trump out of office because he was the lightning rod. If Trump assumes office again, he is only going to continue being the lightning rod. Libs are only going to want to get him out of office instead of want to go left. So because of that, we need to show them that the establishment Democrats cannot save them from the collapsing inner workings of capitalism, the contradictions of neoliberalism, that an establishment Democrat cannot save them from. And we can show this through the failings of a Biden presidency. We can go, hey, there's still a lot of people dying from lack of medical coverage. You know who would make that better? And then start hinting them towards Bernie, or in this case, not Bernie, because Bernie's not going to run in 2024, but possibly someone like Nina Turner, like AOC. And then we start electing people that align with those positions so that we gain some kind of institutional power. That means we vote for people like Shahid Buttar. Cori Bush just won her primary. And I'm sure there's countless other progressive Justice Democrats running in precincts all over the country. But we need to show the sleeping libs that those are the people they need to vote for, not the establishment Democrats. And the best way to signal that is to show them the failings of a Biden presidency. Now, I want to talk about third parties because some people are saying that instead of voting for Biden, we should all vote for third parties. I have two main arguments against that. The first is the left doesn't have the media apparatus necessary to sway the Democratic voting bloc to vote green. We just don't. We're not going to do that through Twitter. There is no way we're going to outscream the establishment media. That is not going to happen, no matter how many of us get on board with that. And then some other advocates of the third party position say that, well, we should still vote third party to get them to 5% so that they can receive federal FEC campaign funding. Now, that's irrelevant under a presidential system. If you look to the majority of other countries that have presidential systems, basically almost all of them don't have a viable third party. And that's because the establishment two party, both of them, will do everything in their power to keep third parties out of the spotlight, out of debates, out of any actual meaningful media coverage. Both of the parties will coalesce to prevent a third party gaining any power. But a Biden presidency would make it a little bit, not a little bit easier. A Biden presidency is not going to do this. But a Democratic presidency would be more amicable to some kind of electoral college reform or even abolishing the electoral college. So what we need in this country to make third parties more viable is a coalitional government. Imagine if there was a proper socialist party in this country that if the Democrats wanted to get anything done, they would need the support of the Socialist Party. And in turn, the Socialist Party would then gain the political capital necessary to enact their policies. The thing is that we're not going to get a coalitional government under a Republican presidency. We can only do that through a Democratic presidency. And because of that, we need to vote for Biden. And we need to, from every election here on forward, vote blue no matter who, so that we can make third parties viable and elevate the democratic processes in this nation. Now, there's another argument levied against I guess rad libs. I guess I'm a rad lib now for advocating for voting for Biden, and that's vote shaming. And what I have to say to that is that you shame people for racism, you shame people for homophobia, you shame people that commit sexual assault, and the reason why you shame these people is because those things cause harm. Effectively, vote shaming is the exact same thing, because not being responsible with your vote essentially causes harm. So I don't want to hear this vote shaming shit in the comments or from anyone, because you do it all the time. It's an effective way at getting people to stop doing the stupid shit that they're doing. Be responsible with your vote. So, in conclusion, the left has never been this strong in America. There has never been such a prominent, such a loud leftist voice in America. And you can thank Bernie Sanders for that. Bernie Sanders went from being an unknown senator from Vermont to becoming the runner-up in the Democratic presidential primary twice. Twice. That is indicative of the willingness to go left from the Democrats. Bernie Sanders was able to capitalize on the failings of the Obama administration and show us a new progressive way. So, when I say that we need to vote for Biden to show Democrats the failings of the establishment Democrats, there is already historical precedent for this example, or for this strategy. And for you to throw away everything that Bernie did for us because Biden has bad foreign policy or because he's a pedophile, I don't know why I did air quotes. He is a pedo. Is an insult to Bernie Sanders and the leftist movement. So if you really care about Bernie Sanders, if you care so much, if you're so fucking mad that the establishment stole the primary from Bernie Sanders, if you're really that mad, vote blue no matter who. Vote for Biden so that you can show all these normie libs that capitalism is no longer sustainable and that Biden cannot save them. That we need Bernie Sanders, Nina Turner, AOC, Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, the squad, all of them. That is the way. That is who we need to vote for. That's all I really had to say. For anyone else that, even despite all of this, is still advocating that we vote for Trump for some reason, I really don't know why. Because they want to incite a revolution that we lose. All I want to say is that if you're still Bernie or bust, you're playing checkers. Me, I'm playing chess. I'm looking at the long run. What does a Biden presidency mean for the left in America? It means that we get another 4 years to move people left. We get 4 years to struggle. And that essentially is what socialism is. We need to struggle. We're always struggling for a more egalitarian, for a more democratic society. But we cannot struggle against fascists. Because fascists will do everything in their power to squash us, to make us irrelevant. Now, if you're looking for a more theory approach to the Bernier bust argument, then I recommend go and watching Vosh. He recently did a video uh, essentially saying that Lenin, Marx, Mao, and a lot of other prominent leftist figures, they're also vote blue no matter who. So go check out that video. I'll link it in the description. But that's pretty much all I had to say. Vote for Biden. The future of the left depends on it. Thank you.